name's Robert Munro, and I'm a lecturer in film and media at Queen Margaret University in Edinburgh. I'll be chairing this panel this afternoon, and I've also got a presentation, a recorded presentation at the end of the panel too. Thanks very much for Jamie Chambers for organising the conference and inviting me to chair this panel, which is presented in partnership with Into Film. So thank you to Into Film. Just before we get started, I want to flag up a couple of things that some of you who were at the first panel would have already heard. There is a new edition of the Film Education Journal out today, and Flip and Jamie will put the links to that in the chat, so it's well worth checking that out. We're also launching today a new website, which is aimed as a kind of teacher-friendly introduction to the journal, where we've taken 2 or 3 articles per edition of the journal and repackaged them with additional audiovisual content, interviews with the authors, roundtable discussions of some of the topics, as well as links to some of the films discussed in the articles too. And that is just www.filmeducationjournal.com. Again, I'm sure Flip and Jamie will put that in the chat, but please have a look at that and share it around your networks, because it's just launching today and we think it's a really great new resource. So today's panel is titled Film Education in Scotland, Exploring Different Approaches to Teaching Film. We've got 3 papers, roughly 20 minutes long per paper. What we'll do is we'll have a very brief discussion in between each one, where I'll ask the participants a question or two, then we'll move on to the next presentation, and we'll have a wider discussion at the end. So if you do have questions, please type them into the chat, and Jamie and Flip will moderate them. They'll kind of collate them all and pass them on to me to facilitate some questions at the end of the discussion. If you also wanted to kind of turn your mic off and give us a statement, then just type that into the chat to Jamie and Flip as well, and they can kind of manage that when we get to the discussion part at the end as well. Just some house rules before we start with our first paper. Everyone is muted by default when you join the room. Of course, this helps us to kind of manage the audio feedback and everything else. But again, as I said, if you do want to say something later on, just type that into the chat and we can facilitate that. These sessions are being recorded as well, and we will put them on our YouTube channel and the Film Education Journal website at a later point. So if you don't want your face on the screen, turn your camera off and don't use the audio and that kind of thing. So to begin with, our first presentation is from Kerry Abercrombie, who is a media and English teacher at Larbert High School in central Scotland, between kind of Glasgow and Edinburgh roughly. Kerry has many years of experience using film in the classroom, which she's going to speak about in just a moment. She's also an Into Film ambassador, so she will talk about Into Film during the presentation as well. And her talk is really about developing a critical film culture in her school, particularly focusing on developing a critical voice within her young people through film. As part of the panel discussion later, we also have Kirsty Gallacher, the Programme Delivery Manager of Into Film Scotland, so she's also happy to field questions as well as Kerry. Right, without any further discussion from me, I'll ask Flip to prepare the first presentation from Kerry Abercrombie.
Hello everyone, my name is Kerry Abercrombie and I am a media and English teacher at Larbert High School and an Into Film Education ambassador. And I am delighted to be here today at the conference to talk about Larbert High School Film Club and our journey. So to start with a bit of context, Larbert High School is one of the largest secondary schools in Scotland. We currently have a school roll of approximately 1,900 pupils. Now, we are very lucky to be in a position where media education, including film, is very much embedded into our curriculum. We present multiple classes of young people for National 5 and higher, and we have several timetabled senior phase wider achievement opportunities, including filmmaking and journalism courses. In addition to that, we also have a very well established School of Media in which young people specialise in media from S1 to S4. Sounds like the dream, right? Well, one thing that we identified that was missing from our school was a film club. Now, we did have a film club, but it was kind of casual. It was very much a case of sort of pick a DVD, chuck it on and eat your cheese sandwich in the corner. And we identified an opportunity to create something that was fun, of course, but that also fed into and reflected our film education values. Now, many of you in attendance today will understand the real desire to have film taken seriously. As a person who holds a degree in film, as many of you I'm sure will be, we are no strangers to perhaps being made to feel like film is the pursuit of entertainment rather than the academic endeavour that perhaps other entertainment counterparts such as literature and art are given. Now, this is something that I completely reject. And so for us, this film club really became a project in developing a critical film culture within our school. And that's what I would like to talk a little bit about today and speak about how we have sought to develop the critical voice of our young people. Now, the first thing that needs to be said is that I believe the success of this is down to three things: the passion of our young people, the dedication of the professionals around them, and the continued support of Into Film as an organisation. And this has allowed us to really grow this critical film culture within the club, the classroom, and the community. So, without further ado, let's meet the LHS Film Club. Here they are. Now, as you have probably already gathered, we are an Into Film Club. We run every Thursday lunchtime, and we currently have around 55 young film fans in our ranks. Now, that is an unofficial number, mostly because I am pretty sure that I'm not actually meant to have that many people in my classroom, but it's fine. We just won't tell anyone. The club is facilitated by myself and my colleague Scott McFarlane, who you can see in the photograph there. And I really use the word facilitated here because we do not run this club. The kids do. The first film that we ever watched was Thor Ragnarok by Taika Waititi, and we kind of chose this in consultation with a few pupils who we knew wanted to be part of a film club. And the idea was to use something with a hugely popular appeal in order to try and bring in the numbers. But actually, as it happened, we didn't really have to do that because it was very much a snowball effect. The numbers crept up and up and up week by week, just through word of mouth. So when it comes to screenings, Scott and I we make a short list and the members vote using a live voting digital platform, as you can see here. And this was the first step really in us letting go, relinquishing control. We didn't want to curate a programme per se. We wanted young people to have access to the films that they wanted to see. And actually, over the course of the last 2 years, there's only been one film that we have chosen for them, which was Yesterday by Danny Boyle. And to be quite frank, that was a matter of disorganisation on our part as opposed to trying to impose anything onto them. We quite simply haven't had to choose the films because the kids are so vocal and so full of ideas about what they want to see. And something that was quite interesting to me, as you can see from the graph here, we sort of went through our 80s, 90s phase. We had like your Back to the Futures, Mrs. Doubtfire, so on and so forth. And when the club were given some vouchers to buy a film, we had an open vote. And bizarrely, out of all of the films in the world, all of the possible titles that they could have chosen, they chose Spaceballs. So they could have had any of the big Marvel titles or any of the hugely popular sort of recent films, but nah, they chose Spaceballs. So Spaceballs is what they got. And that was actually a key moment because it kind of showed us that our choices for them might actually be prohibitive and we might be making huge assumptions about what they want that don't actually fall in line with reality. Now, one person who definitely knows what they want is the first film club member that I am going to introduce you to today, and that is Gregor. Now, Gregor is one of our members who has taken this freedom that we have given the kids to shape the club, and he has really run with it. So Gregor is the founder of our regular debate feature, which we have dubbed where he thinks up statements for the members to discuss. And if any of you here, particularly teachers, are looking for a way to generate a room full of rowdy teenagers, I highly suggest this method. Here are just a few of Gregor's statements. Now, you'll see from the samples here that we are discussing more than just the content of the films. We're actually engaging in a dialogue that is more based around the film industry and about the institutions and structures that are at play. And this was a first step in developing that idea of a critical voice, of the pupils themselves pushing beyond that idea of a simple value assessment of a film. They all have opinions, very loud opinions. But through this feature, we're encouraging them to debate, to give reasons for their criticisms, or indeed for their lauding of an idea. And that is really, really important. Now, another way that we encourage this is through the engaging in the review writing process. So we use the online functionality of the Interfilm website, which allows our members to submit reviews for absolutely any film that they want. And we've seen a huge uptake in this. We're currently sitting at, I think, about 157 reviews in the space of 5 school terms. And undoubtedly, part of the popularity of this is to do with the competition element. So Interfilm have a Review of the Week competition, and we have seen several of our film club students be winners of that competition. So you can see here one of our winning reviews from Dane. Now, I mean, look at this. This is an 11-year-old who, off their own back, totally outside the classroom, completely unpushed by us, deciding to go and write something in order to have his opinions heard and to put them out there. And I think being involved in this process has been a real catalyst for many of our club members and for our club. I think in schools we can be quite guilty, perhaps, of kind of getting on with our own thing. My experience of Interfilm as a teacher was excellent. I had been to CPD, I had used the excellent resources that are available for free, I had entered the ambassador programme, which allowed me to connect with other film club leaders, and that was all fantastic. But the kids didn't necessarily realise that they were part of the wider organisation per se. But as soon as those certificates and those prizes started arriving in the mail, they totally got it. That was like a light bulb moment where they realised that they were part of a bigger film family. And we really tried to capitalise on that and encourage them to get involved in more, which they have done. And they have continued to do through lockdown. This idea of open dialogue, of communication and of sharing has absolutely had an impact on how the club has run during the last 10, 11, 500, whatever it's been, weeks of lockdown. Because the idea that their voice is heard is genuinely powerful. So here are a few examples. We've got a very typical post from Gregor. You can see that he provides a little film fact, and he does some emoji quizzes for the kids. He does this every single day, by the way, which is wild. And he also makes the memes, I believe they call them dank memes. Now, the memes are interesting because this is really part of this critical voice. If you're going to make a meme about something to this level that you can see on the screen, you actually have to understand what it is that you are talking about in order to incite humour towards something or to satirise something. You have to get it. And so I think this is a very small example of that critical voice at play. Now, for something else, here's something from Esme. Now, as you can see, this was an optional task which actually asked pupils to pick a short film. Now, Esme did recommend about 5 short films in this post back to Scott, but she also provided this, which was an attempt, I guess, to persuade Scott that he should choose Fantastic Mr. Fox as the featured film. Now, a totally casual post popped up on like a Monday afternoon is generating this level of engagement in film and this discourse around film. Esme didn't have to do this. Esme wanted to do this, and Esme wanted to prove to others why they should be watching that film by trying to convince them using that critical voice that she's in the process of developing. Now, It's not just the club. We have also managed to integrate Into Film into our timetable, and we have 89 pupils who have chosen Into Film as their wider achievement opportunity. Now, I think this might be called different things in different schools, but basically 2 periods a week of film club, essentially. And the aim there really is to help expose young people to as much film as possible, different genres, different eras, different social messages, different cultures. And it also gives us a chance to build the capacity for film education with other staff in a way that is safe and a way that is fun. But while it is fun, it is also having an impact on the work that pupils are producing in class. I had kind of mentioned before about our School of Media programme, and in this we do a lot of filmmaking. Now, there is absolutely no doubt that the young people who come to Film Club are producing high quality products. And that's not about exposure. That is about that critical film culture. These young people who have the opportunity to dissect film, to break it down into its constituent parts, to discuss the content both aesthetically and technically, as well as the deeper semantic codes and messages, these kids are producing work that quite simply is on another level. But it's not just the media elites that we're seeing benefit from this. The vast majority of our film club members are showing improvements in their literacy, the critical thinking, and their confidence. Time maybe then to meet another film club member, Freya. Now, Freya's a lovely young woman who perhaps was prone to lapses in confidence around her reading and writing and literacy skills. And it just so happens that Scott McFarlane, the other leader, is her English teacher. Now, when Freya joined Film Club back in August, she told us that she'd only seen one film, and that film was Forrest Gump. So we encouraged her to write a review of that, and she did. And she won Review of the Week. Now, that has had a huge impact on Freya outside of Film Club. Now, in English, Freya doesn't ask for extra clarification of instructions at every single task. Freya isn't constantly worried about spelling mistakes or grammar. Freya is not embarrassed by the fact that she's only seen a handful of films. I mean, what a wonderful thing for film to give to a young person. So, moving beyond the school and into the community then, we are developing this strong critical voice in our young people, but what good is that without anywhere for it to go? I'm very keen on the idea of real world engagement. Writing, speaking, creating for a real audience is something that real film critics and academics and filmmakers do, as you know. I don't see why our kids shouldn't be doing that too. We had already kind of seen a little bit about what could happen with this, as 2 of our young people, Louise and James, had been participating in the Into Film Youth Advisory Council for some time. And they were really getting to put these film club skills into practice, that critical voice, that confidence in their own opinions. And they were getting to affect real change. You know, they were out there judging youth film festivals and giving feedback on the organisation's future plans, and they absolutely loved it. Similarly, the pupils who participated in the In the Dark project loved that too. So this was a project where they went as a group to a local independent cinema, and they were invited to critique and give feedback on the visit, not the film, which I believe was Little Women, but the experience of going to that particular cinema. And this actually was twofold, because not only did it get them through the door of a cinema that they would never usually have gone to, but they were able to give their feedback and ideas in a way that made them feel like they were actually affecting change in their local community. And they had loads and loads and loads of ideas. They were literally buzzing about it. I think Oliver had made like a 5-step business plan and had it all written out for them for when the feedback session started. It was a really, really positive experience, minus a very dramatic case of a missing quiche, but we'll not go into that, or the fact that a group of 17-year-olds wanted to order a quiche at a cinema. But this type of real world engagement is what we want to encourage as much as possible. So about a year ago, when two of our film club members, Max and James, approached us and asked us if they could start a film podcast, as you can imagine, we were absolutely delighted, particularly me with my old student radio background. So they planned it, they came up with the features, they recorded it on a Monday lunchtime, they edited it themselves. Bingo. They did everything from start to finish. All we did was make it available. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podbean. Now, I'm of that sort of millennial generation where I know a lot of people who have got podcasts of their own. And I had a suspicion that these kids could actually do a better job than most of them, and they did. It is absolutely fantastic. And you can now go into your pocket and look up LHS Film Club podcast, and you or anyone else in the world can hear what our young people have got to say about film right now. How empowering for a young person. How satisfying to know that you're being listened to, that your ideas can happen, that your voice can be heard. You know, they say that opportunity knocks, and I think that's a funny phrase because as soon as we threw open our doors at the LHS Film Club and as soon as we started engaging and sharing what we were doing, big things just kind of started happening. Was it nice to be a finalist for Teacher of the Year? Of course it was. Were the kids excited about making it to the top 3 schools in the UK for Film Club of the Year? Absolutely they were. But so much more than that has come from the wide range of experiences and opportunities that we've been able to give to our young people thanks to Into Film and the work of our film club family. Never ever in a list of weird and wonderful things that I thought that I would be doing as a teacher did I think that I'd be sitting watching a film about Mary Queen of Scots in Stirling Castle, the place where she was crowned as a baby, with my kids and the actor from the film. And this is what I'm talking about. It is totally unique experiences, opportunities that are right there, that are available to you and your kids. It's just a matter of throwing that door open. Now, we live in a world where everyone has an opinion. Kids know this. Now more than ever, opinion seems to be the order of the day. What a strong critical film culture does, what developing that critical voice does for young people, is it allows them to become used to regularly assessing and reassessing their opinions. It allows them to understand that having a different opinion to someone doesn't make them your enemy, that opinions are subjective. And crucially, it teaches them that while everyone is entitled to an opinion, if you want to convince Miss Abercrombie that Black Panther isn't the greatest film in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, then you better be bringing some solid research, facts, and statistics. Thank you.
Thanks so much for that, Kerry. That was a truly wonderful presentation. It was absolutely fantastic. I'll ask a wee question now, and as I said earlier, if you have some questions, can you put them in the chat and we'll collate them and ask them at the end of the panel. I was going to ask you the question about the quiche, Kerry, but then I figured maybe we should get on to more serious matters. I really loved the discussion of the dank memes and podcast as well. I just wondered, in terms of your presentation, talking about the development of a critical voice in your young people, do you think that this kind of expressing this voice through those digital media forms is as valued within the curriculum and maybe wider society as, you know, the traditional written word and the traditional essay?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I don't know, that the value is the same in terms of what you would get at the end of it. It's certainly not going to be something that's going to get them an award at, Nat 5 or higher, making a meme and slapping it on the page. But I do think that these sort of more, I don't know, what would you call it, modern or casual expressions do have a place. If that's the sort of language that young people are choosing to communicate, or the method that they're choosing to communicate by, then that does have a value, I think. And I know certainly my film club leader, who is also on the call today, Scott, absolutely values them, and he spends a long time, I think, every day laughing quite a lot in his house.
Thanks, that's brilliant. And I think that's a really good point. I think it's something that we think about at the university as well, and I'm sure other educators on the line do. How can we give young people the means to express themselves in those digital media forms that they maybe are more comfortable? And we do quite a lot about trying to offer alternative forms of assessment that's not a 3,000-word essay, but a 5-minute video essay or a podcast or something. Like you said, the balance is there is making sure it's still rigorous and everything else. But no, thank you so much. That was fantastic. I've got a few more questions for the end as well, and hopefully we'll have some from our audience. But now we'll move on to our second presentation. This is from Dr. Laura Findlay, who is Project Coordinator at Screen Education Edinburgh. For those of you who aren't familiar, Screen Education Edinburgh is a charity involved in community filmmaking and film education in the north of Edinburgh and beyond that as well, and they've been going for around 40 years now. Laura's going to talk about two projects they've been running over the past year. The first one is called Our Edinburgh, where they encourage young people with the support of a filmmaker in their classroom to reflect upon the place in which they live. And the second is very pertinent to our current situation. She's going to talk about a project called Your Take, where they had to kind of pivot to an online filmmaking project in response to the COVID-19 lockdown. So without any further ado, Flip, if you could load up Laura's presentations, and again, put your questions in the chat and we'll collect them up for the end of the panel. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Laura Findlay at Screen Education Edinburgh. I'm a project coordinator there, and today I'm going to talk about the Edinburgh City Film Education Programme, which is a partnership between Into Film, Centre for the Moving Image and the Arts and Creative Learning team at City of Edinburgh Council. I'm going to be talking about two programmes. The first one is a face-to-face filmmaking programme called Our Edinburgh, which was free to, well, primarily working in schools. And I'm going to talk just briefly to give an overview of that. That programme's currently on hold at the moment because of lockdown. And I'm going to talk about the way that kind of evolved over its first few months really of it launching, and then I'm going to talk about our response to lockdown with our online filmmaking programme Your Take. But before I do that, I'll give you a little bit of background about the charity that I work for. So if you haven't heard of Screen Education Edinburgh before, or you're not sure about what we do, I'll give you a short version of who we work with, what we do and what our aim is. So you can see here I've taken an excerpt from our mission, which is available on our website. We are a charitable organisation. We're a film education charity based in North Edinburgh in Pilton. We have been active for over 4 decades, and some of you may know us in our past name as Pilton Video. And what we do is we develop skills across all different people, different ages, in different scenarios. So we work in schools, but we also work with alternate schools, with youth groups. We partner with different organisations that work with young people or adults or other people within the community. We run our own courses, many of which are free for people to get access to filmmaking equipment, learn key skills, whether they are young people or adults. We have also give access to meeting facilities, to small screening facilities that we have, and in particular our edit suites. For those that work freelance or independently, we also offer low-cost hire equipment, and lots of different things like qualifications from access to more advanced on our Moving Image Arts programme, and we also run BFI programmes too. So there's lots and lots of different activity. We do have a long history of community filmmaking as well, which many of you may be aware of too, that happens in North Edinburgh and beyond. But most of our activity is within Edinburgh and in the Lothians as well. And you can see that our aim really is to make film accessible for all. So we don't want there to ever be a barrier to someone getting into film, essentially. We work to develop and give the skills to people from areas of multiple deprivations, those from low-income backgrounds, so that they can gain the skills in understanding film and in filmmaking, and getting access to industry, or going on to university, or going on to be freelance, for example. And it really is about just seeing the barriers that are out there and making sure that we respond to those in order to make sure that film is available to everybody. But I'm going to be talking about just one aspect of that. So that is primarily working with schools as far as our programme, Our Edinburgh, is concerned. Our Edinburgh was a programme which is currently on hold, as I said, that offered free to primary schools, high schools, secondary schools, and it was really about embedding filmmaking more sustainably within the curriculum, using equipment that schools perhaps already had, such as iPads, for example, and giving teachers and pupils the skills in order to take after our programme, in order to keep on making film. We wanted it to be kind of sustainable beyond their interaction with us and beyond the programme. And the films that they made as part of this programme were all films about social justice. So whether that was films about gender inequality, race, aspects of politics such as Brexit, homelessness, refugees, it was really up to the school and the young people in particular what they wanted to make their films about. And part of that was also CLPL for teachers as well, as key to that programme. So better than I can describe, actually, I have a short video for us to watch, so let me just click on to that now. That gives you a little bit of a look into some of the activity that happened for Our Edinburgh.
Take 3. Action.
Did you guys hear about this new snack? It's called like Snackatropolis. Oh my god, it's so amazing. Okay, bye. Okay, get into position.
Next shot, we're going to
Sit. There's a long shot.
My name's Gillian Chalmers and I'm a music and technology teacher here at Trinity Primary School. When I saw it advertised, I just thought, I want to give the kids the broadest experiences that we possibly can and use the expertise that is out there, and also it would help me to learn a little bit more about how to use film effectively in my practice. One of the main things I saw develop was their confidence.
Do roll one, see one, pick one again.
When they took on the different roles and they had to be the director, or they had to be able to have the confidence to give direction to the rest of the team. Learned lots about how to edit. Quite a lot of that was brand new for them. There was a lot to learn.
Get in Brexit done. Done, done, done.
Hi, you look like you need some help. There's this cafe down the road called Social Bite.
Mom!
We demand equality! We demand equality! We demand equality! We demand equality!
Okay, so to just tell you a little bit more about Our Edinburgh then, you saw some of the activity that happened there. We launched in August of 2019 and we quite quickly started working with our first batch of schools for our first term in October 2019. We ran for 2 terms, so we had worked with Trinity, Blackhall, Fox Covert, St Mary's, Drummond High School, Oakland Special School, Craiger Park, St John's, Clermiston. That's just to name a few to give you an idea of some of the schools and some of the areas that we worked in. We had a 3rd term planned with schools signed up, but obviously lockdown happened. And the aim of this project was twofold, really, to sum it up as briefly as I can. It was to get children involved and young people involved in filmmaking, It was to give them the skills in which to do that, so that beyond the programme they could independently and in school continue with filmmaking and continue to increase those skills, and hopefully continue to work with us at Screen Ed to develop those skills. But you know, they were armed with the basics of filmmaking. They worked, as you can see from an image there, with boom poles, mics, they had iRegs. Everything was shot on iPads because many of the schools had access to iPads, but we provided any equipment the schools didn't have. And equipment that we did use beyond iPads, as you can see, we made sure was as economically viable as possible for the school to get access to, whether that be through fundraising or you know, and any apps that we used were either free or very kind of low in cost, and we made teachers fully aware of that, but we wanted to also show them that you didn't necessarily need all of these things to make the film. If you simply just had your iPad, then what are some of the challenges in making a film that way, and what are some of the ways you can respond to those challenges to get that film made, and made well with the equipment that you have. And so that second strand, that second big aim, was to give the teachers the skills and the knowledge in order to do that, so that ripple effect would happen that Gillian so brilliantly talked about in the video that I've just showed you. You know, she rolled that out with other learners rather than just make one film that she made with the group that we were working with her. She went on to roll that learning out with 3 other classes and actually submitted a total of 4 films. So it was absolutely fabulous to see the other work that she'd done. She also we had other teachers share that knowledge with other staff members too, and it was great. That's exactly what we wanted to see, that real ripple effect. We also had pupils making films at home as well. You know, they were so inspired and excited by filmmaking and learning those skills that they continued on making animations when they got home, either on their phones or their parents' phones or on their iPads. They used iMovie or different apps like Filmic Pro, which was one of the ones that we showed them how to use, or our tutors showed them how to use. So real great early feedback and lots and lots of engagement beyond the programme, which was absolutely fantastic. This is exactly what we wanted to see. And we did have lots more schools signed up, more high schools, which is exactly what we were looking to do too, because initially we had lots and lots of primary schools, but we definitely wanted more high schools, and we wanted to work with more special schools too. Having such a great experience with Oaklands and other special schools we'd work with on other programmes too, we wanted to offer something to them that worked for them and their learners. And so we had a lot of interest and a lot of schools on our books that we hadn't worked with yet that were signed up, and unfortunately lockdown happened, so we had to put all this on pause for the safety of our staff and obviously of our learners too. So the next step really was, what do we do now? How do we continue to offer filmmaking with as little barriers as possible, being aware that we can't bring equipment out to people, we can't head into schools or other spaces of learning or community centres or what have you in order to do that, because it wasn't safe to do that. So we were aware, like everybody else, that we were going to have to move things online, that it was a completely different landscape for ourselves and for our learners. So one of the first things we did was opened up a dialogue really with teachers that we'd worked with, schools we'd worked with, just finding out how they were working, what was and wasn't working for them, what the support they would like, if this was something that, an offer that they would want, because we were aware that at that time there were so many online offers, it perhaps might be overwhelming, but we wanted to offer something that was substantial and we'd still have those key skills that people could take away and continue filmmaking and continue to kind of roll out that learning and have that ripple effect. And we were aware, of course, that we would have to broaden this out, because we weren't just going to be working with teachers and their pupils, but also we were going to be working with households. So that might be an individual learner, it might be siblings working together of different ages and different abilities, and different experience of making film. Parents and guardians, we were encouraging them to get involved too. And then within that, we were also going to have teachers and their classes as well. So a whole different landscape for us to consider. And to show you what we finally came up with and what our offer for Your Take, essentially what Your Take became was, I'll pass you over to one of our film tutors, Sean Young.
Hello, I'm Sean and I'm from Screen Education Edinburgh, and I'm here today to tell you about Your Take, which is a free online opportunity for you young people aged up to 18 to develop your filmmaking skills so you can make your very own short film from the comfort of your own home. Now, if you don't have access to any fancy filmmaking equipment, then don't worry. We will show you how to make a good looking short film with no more than a smartphone or a tablet or an iPad. You'll be taken through the processes of how to make a film through access to our video guides, which will be led by one of our film tutors. And we'll take you through the process of making a film, developing your skills in camera and sound, and helping you through the writing, filming and editing stages of your own film. The film should be no longer than 2 minutes in length, made indoors. You can make a documentary, an animation or a fiction film. Use the props and costumes that you have available in your own home. There will be a list of themes to base your film on, chosen by our youth advisory panel. We also encourage family members, guardians and anyone else you share your home with to get involved. So to take part, simply register for free on our website, which will take only 2 minutes, and there you will get full access to all our learning videos and materials, as well as support from our film tutors, including feedback on your work, Q&A sessions and live workshops. So if you're up for a challenge and would like to make your very own short film, then get involved and get making. We'd like to see your take.
So, as you can see, as Sean explained, it takes learners through, regardless of ability, through all the different stages of learning in order to make a finished film. And participants submit their films, which are to be 2 minutes or under, to us, and we also have a youth advisory panel that will be selecting certain films as part of a special mentions category as well. And I've been working closely with them over the last wee while, and they've helped us to shape aspects of the course. They've given us feedback on learning resources, also on our system, helped us by voting for particular themes that our participants can shape their films around, such as home, boredom, all things that are relevant during lockdown just now. But to speak to this current slide, you can see on the left here we have our objectives. Now, these have been shaped in response to lockdown. A lot of them are in keeping with the aims and objectives we had for our Edinburgh programme that I mentioned at the beginning of this presentation. Those being increasing that participation in learning in film education. Instead of just for teachers and pupils now, we also have families. So we've got adult learners in there that aren't in education, that are working with their young people, with their children, or with whoever it is that they are in guardianship of. So we wanted to make it as accessible and as broad as possible, because we're aware we had lots of different levels of experience and lots of different levels of learner, as I mentioned earlier. We wanted to create a great online community, basically, where it was a safe space for our learners, regardless of age. Get their confidence increased, get them sharing their ideas with us before they actually start shooting their film. And we've had a great level of engagement from our learners. Lots of them are doing animation, lots of them are getting more confident in sharing their ideas, through having that support from our tutors, whether it be through those video guides and resources which they have access to all the time, or if it's the set Q&A sessions, the live interaction with tutors, the feedback sessions, again, building that classroom space as much as we possibly can virtually, but key to that is building that support and encouragement as much as we can possibly virtually, with the way that we're working at the moment. And we're hoping, because we're also working with not just teachers and pupils but parents and guardians too, that them seeing the confidence and the some of those transformative abilities that we're all aware of that film can have, they see those benefits of their children learning these new skills and of themselves learning these new skills too. We've had lots of feedback that this is always something that the parents and guardians have wanted to do too, and so to do it as a family is also a great boost during lockdown as well. And that last outcome, as you can see, is a direct response to the situation that we find ourselves in currently. We're all aware of the impact that this currently has on, including ourselves and others' mental health. So we, as well as kind of imparting skills and giving people skills in order to make films themselves, and the key thing is for it to be fun too, for it to be a creative outlet and an escape from the day-to-day of lockdown essentially. So we've had lots of elements like that, fun quizzes, sharing each other's work, brilliant storyboards, drawings, making it a fun, safe space essentially. When you're on our system, for everyone to share their ideas, and to just really have as much, be as creative as possible with the themes in terms of how they interpret those and what they do with the particular film that they make, whether it be drama, documentary, animation, any particular genre as well that they choose to work in. And lastly, to wrap up, because I'm getting close to my time here, the challenges, I'll talk to those first. Challenges and early feedback. Engagement, as everyone knows, is a major challenge when you're dealing with virtual learning. We were aware of that heading in. I think what helped a lot was keeping that dialogue open, which we continue to do with anyone we're working with, and including parents and guardians as well, and our young people. Are they getting access to our system okay? Are they having any technical difficulties? How can we help them? Once they're up and running on our system, making sure that they understand how to navigate that system, but also for those that have maybe got access to the system and aren't and getting involved in the chat as much, we send out newsletters to them. The tutors give them one-on-one feedback. There's really just having a human face, I think, has been a key thing for us at the other side of a screen. There's lots of resources available there, but the key thing is having that safe space, that community feel that's so important to see in terms of filmmaking and getting people involved in filmmaking. That's really helped us to up engagement with our virtual learning environment. And to give you quick stats just to finish, it's obviously a need and a want for this out there too, across schools and across in houses as well, with parents, guardians and young people. We've had over 150 applications since we launched, which was just a number of weeks ago, and that actually doesn't account for each individual learner that we have as well. Those are simply just the numbers of applications that we have with several learners within each household too, as well as the schools and the classes that we're working with on top. So a real positive, healthy amount of applications we've had there too. And our next steps, just to conclude then, is of course responding to the ever-changing landscape that we're facing right now, and that looks to be blended learning. So it's keeping that dialogue open with everyone, seeing what works for them and what support we can offer, whether that be part face-to-face where it's safe to do so, and continuing to shape and monitor our virtual learning filmmaking experience to make it the best experience we possibly can. So I'd like to thank you for your time, and I'm really looking forward to hearing more of the presentations today and seeing what everybody has been teaching out there. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Laura, for that very interesting and fascinating presentation about the work Screen Education Edinburgh have been doing over the past year or so. So again, we'll do the same format as before. I'll ask Laura a question, and if you guys have some questions, please put them in the chat and we'll return to them at the end of the panel. Laura, I really liked your discussion of the ripple effect and how that's the kind of desire for not just Screen Education in Edinburgh, but kind of everybody working in film education. You get a small group of people, you kind of foster their enthusiasm and interest, do some skills development, and then hope that filters out amongst other staff or other children and into other families. I just wondered, how do we try and capture and monitor that going forward? Do you think that's one of the challenges for us as film educators?
Yeah, definitely. I think for us it is just that key thing of making sure that you foster good relationships with whoever you're working with, so that you can kind of catch up with them and make it more of a longitudinal thing where you're just keeping those conversations going, because quite often teachers are so busy and everybody's so busy really, that there's some things that if it's not directly making a film that they go on to do after the project, they maybe don't necessarily think would actually be really useful for us to know that they've engaged in. Things like just even a lot of the things that Kerry was talking about, the differences that they see in the confidence of their pupils, or the differences that they see in other subjects, and maybe where they've used some of those film skills with another teacher, for example. So there is a challenge in capturing that, and I think one of the main things is for us is to just keep those conversations going beyond our, so for our Edinburgh, it was really a kind of 6 weeks that we were there face to face, the tutors were there face to face with them, or sorry, my goodness, it's like a world ago, 8 weeks. 8 weeks, not 6. And we would just continue to kind of beyond that have those conversations with them, and chip in with bits of evaluation, quite light touch, at later stages as well. So a bit, kind of a bit of a casual approach, but also a bit of a more like kind of rigorous and strategic and monitored approach. But yeah, it's always a challenge, particularly when, for teachers in particular, they'll go to different schools, or they'll, move around a lot as well. So yeah, it's just try to keep in touch with everyone, really, I think is the key thing to do.
Excellent, thanks. Yeah, that speaks to the presentation that I've got coming up next as well, which is with probationary teachers. And again, they're all going to be in different schools probably next year. So how do we make sure we maintain those relationships going forward? So on to the final presentation, which is from myself. It discusses a project that we've been running at Queen Margaret University with partner organisations, Into Film Scotland and the Moving Image Archive, and probationary teachers in East Lothian. I'll get Flip to load up the presentation again, but just in advance, apologies for the poor sound quality. For whatever reason, it goes out of sync about a couple of minutes in. You should be able to hear it okay, but the sound and the image goes out of sync. So I'll have to try and fix that before the storm of blended learning next semester, when next semester starts. So again, we'll do the same thing. We'll play the presentation and then we'll have a discussion afterwards. Again, please put any questions that you have in the chat. If you want to actually say something, just let us know in the chat and we can unmute your mic for the discussion afterwards. Thanks very much.
Hello everyone, my name is Robert Munro and I'm a lecturer in film and media at Queen Margaret University in Edinburgh. And over the next 15 minutes or so, I want to talk to you about a project that we've been running since September 2019 called Raising Literacy Attainment Through Scotland's Film Archives. We've been running this project in collaboration with the Moving Image Archive in Glasgow, Into Film, and the filmmaker Jonathan Charles, along with 5 probationary teachers recruited from East Lothian Council here in Scotland. One of the main things that I want to pull out from the project is how quickly those probationary teachers adapted to using film for the first time in the classroom, and how successful they found it in working with their young people. As the project is still ongoing, it's due to conclude in December this year. The presentation really does just present preliminary findings, some of the things that at this point we think are useful to pull out. Some parts of the project have been disrupted by COVID-19 as well, so bear that in mind as you hear about how the project has unfolded. So to give you a wee bit more information about what the project actually involved, we had spoken with Moving Image Archive and Into Film for a period of months to develop this collaborative project, whereby teachers would engage with the archives held by the Moving Image Archive, the fantastic rich content that they have about Scotland's kind of film history, and to bring that to life in their classrooms with their young people, and the kind of learning that came from that. It would subsequently help to create a new resource shared by Into Film and the Moving Image Archive, and I'll talk to those agencies a wee bit more on the next slide. We initially actually recruited 6 probationary teachers. One of them dropped out quite early on in the project, so we ended up with the 5 that we had hoped for anyway, which was pretty good. Myself and my colleague Sandra Eady, who is the programme leader in initial teacher education at Queen Margaret, pitched this project to the teachers at their kind of practitioner inquiry day with East Lothian Council. Practitioner inquiry is something that probationary teachers in Scotland go through during their first year, their probationary year. It's a piece of action research where they identify an issue within their class that they think they can try and improve through pedagogical approaches. They were given a topic each year by the council. This year with East Lothian Council, it was the topic of questioning, a nice broad topic that actually fitted with this film project quite well. So it's something that the teachers can identify, and they intervene into their classroom using their research into particular strategies of questioning. In this case, they produce some evidence at the end of it, anecdotally and based on their own observations over whether this approach was successful or not, and trying to offer solutions of whatever the problem they had identified was. At the end of their year, they then share this with their peers at a practitioner inquiry event, which was due to be held at the Brompton Theatre in Musselburgh, but as with everything else, has been waylaid by the COVID-19 outbreak. So we thought that was a really good opportunity for them to kind of share with colleagues who perhaps hadn't used film in the classroom before, how successful they found it was, and to really kind of spread that word peer to peer about how positive film can be in the classroom. Those 5 teachers that we recruited undertook a series of training workshops at Queen Margaret University, attended by, in the first instance, Into Film and Moving Image Archive, and subsequently our filmmaker Jonathan Charles. And they undertook a number of different activities during those workshops. The first few workshops were focused on film literacy activities, which I can talk to a wee bit more in a few slides' time, which they were unfamiliar with, and ways that Into Film and Moving Image Archive knew worked quite well to engage young people in thinking about how film works, how it's constructed to tell stories in the first instance. Once they had that kind of knowledge of how film works, they were then to create their own archive film, and I've kind of put archive in scare quotes there because, of course, any film that you put in an archive is an archive. There's not necessarily a genre of the archive film. But what we wanted the young people and teachers to think about is, why have these films been kept in the Moving Image Archive and Scotland's Moving Image Archive? What is it about them that is seen to be nationally or culturally and historically important that they need to be preserved for future generations? And in that sense, we wanted them to think about the young people. What would they think about their life and their families and friends and communities and their school and their kind of work that they were undertaking in school on particular topics? What should be preserved for future generations? So it was to get them to think about their own sense of place and space in the world, and think about what they thought was important to be retained for future generations. The idea was then that these films would be screened in their own schools, kind of community screenings, but also at celebration screening at Queen Margaret in June this month. Unfortunately, neither of those things happened. One of the teachers started a little bit of shooting before lockdown in March, but not enough to really compose a final film out of. So unfortunately, one of the kind of key elements of this project was waylaid by the coronavirus outbreak. However, we still think there's loads of great stuff that we can pull out of it to help design this collaborative resource between the Moving Image Archive and Into Film. So I just wanted to give you a wee bit more information about the reasoning behind the project, what the rationale was for all the different partners involved. For us at Queen Margaret University, this current academic year is the first year that we've had an initial teacher education programme at the university. It's a BA Hons primary studies education programme. It takes 140 students per year. So obviously by the end of the current crop, getting into 4th year, we'll have well over 600 students on the campus at that point. So it's a really good opportunity for us to think about how we can be creative with that programme in terms of initial teacher education, particularly my colleague, Dr. Sandra Eady, who is, as I mentioned, the programme leader for that programme. She's been very keen from the beginning that the programme is very creative and progressive in the way that it thinks about education, with things like film and media and expressive arts and outdoor learning and all these kinds of areas. In the second year of the programme, there is a module specifically called Creativity and Culture, which will be starting in September. And for those of us involved in film education, it's a really exciting opportunity actually to speak to such a large cohort of students and really kind of set that fire within them early on in terms of how film can be used successfully in the classroom. So for us, this was a really good opportunity to get that direct knowledge about the teacher experience, particularly probationary teachers who have just come out of a similar programme. How do they find using film in the classroom? What can they learn from that to embed in the design of their own programme? For the Moving Image Archive, they obviously always have a desire to understand how teachers use their resources. They have a wealth of educational resources on their Scotland on Screen website, and of course understanding how teachers engage with them can only help them to make them better in the future. They also have a desire to widen the reach, as any institution would, of these existing resources to try and share them with a wider audience. And again, the collaboration with Interfilm works quite nicely there. They've got an enormous reach across schools in Scotland and also the rest of the United Kingdom, so it's a nice tie-up in that sense. And Moving Image Archive have been creating resources with teachers for a number of years now. So again, this is furthering the good work that they're already doing and speaking to teachers and trying to have the resources that they use on their website very teacher focused and actually designed with teachers in mind from the beginning. Interfilm have been working with Moving Image Archive for a number of years now, running collaborative workshops and CPD sessions for teachers. So again, it was a good opportunity to continue fostering that good working relationship that they have. For Interfilm as well, although it's a UK-wide film education charity, and the Scotland team, of course, are always keen to create bespoke resources for their specific communities. So we thought this was, again, a good opportunity for them to do something bespoke for teachers in Scotland. Jonathan Charles is a filmmaker who's worked with schools and teachers and young people in East Lothian for many, many years. He's got lots of experience in terms of film education and developing resources, and is quite keen to work with us at Queen Margaret University, particularly with our new initial teacher education programme. The project was funded by Screen Scotland, specifically through their fund, the Film Education Partnership Fund. As you can see by its very name, the idea is to, again, continue to foster that greater collaboration between all these different providers, encourage people not to kind of work in silos, in isolation, reinventing the wheel on their own all the time, and instead kind of share knowledge and good practice that already exists. So I just wanted to briefly, in terms of the academic research in the project, we had a number of different methods through which to gather data as the project was running. And the key one was focus groups. We held 2 focus groups with teachers, one at the very beginning, one at the very end. The one at the beginning, you might imagine, was to gather up whatever knowledge that they already had about film, and to ask what kind of challenges they thought they might face in the project, to see what training they'd had, if any, during their initial teacher education programs. We discovered that their knowledge about film and its uses in the classroom was fairly low. Some had had a little bit of training through their initial teacher education courses, but it might have just been a one-day workshop about how you could use film as a text in the same way as a literary text. 2 of the participants actually went to the same university. One of them could remember a bit of film and media on one of the modules, the other student couldn't remember that at all. So again, that kind of points to maybe it wasn't well integrated enough into the programme as a whole. This participant said that they were really looking forward to this part of the module, the film activity part of their training, but it was just a piece of reflective writing that they had to do at the end of it, and they were quite disappointed with that. They wanted to do what we were learning in practice, i.e. make little short films with their classes while they were on placement. That kind of was very much allied to what another participant says, that as a probationary, they're very frequently discussing reading comprehension in their classrooms, as you would expect. Children are obviously regularly reading books. Obviously, children are always watching films or watching moving image content on various different devices, but for this teacher, that was never true of film in terms of how they were expected to approach those placements and reflect on how the young people engaged with their learning. We also found, as we thought we might, that there was a bit of a lack of confidence around using technology in the classroom, and they were unsure as to what type of technology might be available and how they would use it. They were apprehensive, as again we would expect, about the time demands in terms of learning to use film in the classroom and picking up these new skills. especially given as probationers they've got so many different competing pressures in that first year, and obviously they're trying very hard to get a job for the following year, so there's quite a lot of pressure in this year. What I'll do now is I will play some clips from the teachers talking. This is from the second focus group, which we held just about 10 days ago or so. So again, these findings are very preliminary, but I think it's really good to hear from the teachers themselves and their point of view on how they found the project went.
We spent a lot of time looking at sort of the components of film, as in what goes together, what all the different elements that come together, and really sort of built a strong knowledge of that before we even started considering our own film. So we did a lot of the activities that we learned when we came to see you and Jonathan. They were really they loved it. The for instance, the clapping one, about the cuts, and just we sort of had a routine each week where even when we were at our storyboarding process and actually planning our own film, we would always watch a new short film, and it would be we'd try and go for a different genre each time, so it was sort of broadening their knowledge of film and not just a lot of them just straight away think it's just animation, but it really sort of opened their eyes to all the different films you can get that are out there. So there was even some amateur stuff that we watched, they really enjoyed, and it was really good. So we went through that each week because they had that sort of strong knowledge there. They were really, how they sort of analysed a film at the beginning was really different to sort of 5-6 weeks into it, because they had learned so much. The impact of, say, for example, for sounds or colour or they actually loved this because we did a lot of activities about different camera shots, and they thought it was really fun. But they could make the connection between, if it was a written story and there was punctuation, they would know the effect that would have, and they could say what effect the camera shot had on the story and the emphasis it was making. And so they would really sort of go into that and say, well, they did this in the film because, and they could sort of really, and that worked well because that meant the character was really upset, and you could see that through the use of camera angles and things like that.
There were 3 learners in that group that they can't read to the same level as the rest of the class. They're on Oxford Reading Tree books, and when the rest of the class are reading novels, and I could kind of tell that usually if we're doing kind of whole class things, or even in their reading group, they can tell that their books aren't as in depth and they're not as interesting, and they're kind of suited for younger children, and they could kind of see that, and they often get quite bored with the questions I'd ask them in their reading group and things. And then when we started doing it as whole class, looking at films and looking at kind of evaluating and looking at inference through films and images, they started to really kind of growing confidence in the class, and a lot of the kind of lower ability, and also some of my EAL children were quite happy to answer questions based on films, and they seem to kind of understand things more.
As in, even not just the technicalities of using the equipment and stuff, which is definitely a big help and something I would have found quite daunting beforehand, I would have said. But even just to the aspects of analysing the film, and even I found the 3 C's and the 3 S's, that was really, really helpful, and helped break it down. And I now, off the top of my head, wouldn't have to look at that sheet to think of all the questions I could ask them, and I feel like I could evaluate a film better myself now. So yeah, I'd say I definitely feel much more confident and would be much more willing to going forward after seeing how engaged they were. I would be much more proactive in using it in the classroom.
Apologies for the poor sound quality. That was a recorded Zoom call, which is why it also randomly flips to me or the other participants during the recording there. But hopefully you got a sense of the different ways in which the teachers felt they and their young people benefited from the project and how useful they found it in the classroom. Generally speaking, from that second focus group, they all reported an increased confidence in using film. They felt much more knowledgeable about how films work to tell stories. You heard Kat there talking about her and her young people now paying much more attention to how shots are constructed in order to express character, emotion, or advance the narrative of the film. They all reported an observable improvement in literacy attainment. Kirsty actually mentioned in her dialogue in the focus group, it was across all 3 different literacy categories that she kind of has in her classroom, high, average and low literacy attainment. All 3 seem to be more adept at answering questions about film and coming up with more innovative questions about film than they did in a written text. All of the teachers noticed an improvement in how young people worked collaboratively with one another. Again, Kirsty mentioned a young person who is normally not very keen on group work and just wants to do their own thing, but when it came to the film project, they were very involved and very part of the team. Of course, film is an inherently collaborative medium, so that's great to hear. As I've already mentioned, they were all fantastic at flexibly incorporating these film education activities into their existing strategies for teaching and their questioning strategy about their practitioner inquiry. One thing I think is really important that they all flagged up, you heard Kirsty mention the 3 C's and the 3 S's resource there, was how important it was to have easily accessible resources that they could take and run with that were simple and clean and easy to understand, and that they could just work with straight away in the classroom, and by the time they'd used it for a month or 2, they had that embedded knowledge in how to use film with their young people. So just briefly to conclude, as we saw in the previous slide, I think it's really important that resources are very easily and freely accessible for teachers, but also I think clear points of access are important. Where do they find short films to show in their classroom? Are they easily thematized? Are they grouped by age range so that they know they're age appropriate for their young people? There are of course lots of good websites out there that do that, but it is quite a disparate landscape. We feel that newly qualified teachers offer really good opportunities for research into film education, a highly motivated group who are encouraged to be reflective about their practice, are encouraged to adopt digital literacy skills, are looking to kind of stand out in terms of hoping to be more employable after their probationary year concludes. We would also say there needs to be more systematic research into what part film education plays in initial teacher education courses across Scotland. Again, a very small sample, but the focus group that we ran with the teachers kind of showed a lot of gaps in that area, which is something, of course, we're thinking about as we begin our own initial teacher education programme. Despite the fact that the project was disrupted and they didn't actually get to make films, which is what the young people were so looking forward to, the response was hugely positive from the teachers. They were all keen to be involved in future research going forward. They're all saying they're going to use film in the classroom in their next job as well and kind of spread that good practice to other teachers. It still seems like specialist intervention is necessary in terms of organisations like Moving Image Archive into film, or having filmmakers work with teachers and young people. It is a lot to ask teachers to self-teach themselves these film education skills in the classroom. And just finally, to kind of wrap up, we're trying to take some of these learnings into a professional accreditation in film education course that we'll be running at Queen Margaret in 2021. Again, funded by Screen Scotland. We're hoping to bring together filmmakers, professional filmmakers who are already working with young people in educational settings and teachers to kind of have this shared collaborative knowledge exchange and try to really get to grips with a comprehensive pedagogical approach to film education, which kind of comes from the ground up, comes from the people already in the classrooms doing this. I'm aware that's way over time, but thank you very much for listening, and we hope to field some of your questions soon. Thank you.
Hello again, everyone. Apologies again for the sound. I'm aware the quality is very poor at the end of that video, so if anything was unclear, just give me a shout and I can clarify it now. Hopefully you can actually hear me a bit better now than you could in the video there. So we've had a few questions in the chat for our various participants, but I kind of also wanted to begin with a question for Kirsty Gallacher, who is, as I mentioned earlier, the Programme Delivery Manager for Interfilm in Scotland, and as Interfilm are involved in all 3 of these projects. I just wondered, Kirsty, if you could speak a wee bit about the importance of collaboration with other institutions and educational partners, but also the importance of collaboration with teachers. Obviously, Kerry is very plugged into the Interfilm Ambassador scheme, and how important that is to you as an organisation.
Of course, thanks, Robert. Well, yeah, partnership and collaboration is really important to our work, and I think should be, you know, I think actually from the presentations and everything we've been talking about today, is quite evident how important and successful collaboration and partnership can be. I mean, essentially what is it's about working together to achieve, you know, common goal. Suppose into film, we've got quite a sort of like a clear vision and a clear mission, and that's inspiring dynamic ways of learning and using film. And ensuring that film is at the heart of all our children and young people's life and learning. And I think something that's quite interesting as well, you know, it's not just about, we obviously collaborate and work in partnership with various organisations, but I think, you know, it's about how we collaborate and how we work with our film club leaders and our educators that engage with their offer. But I think also, you know, it's about how, I think a couple of things that Kerry was sort of talking about in our presentation, and Laura as well, you know, teachers collaborating with teachers, how educators are collaborating and working with the young people, you know, to kind of empower them, and how all of that learning and that knowledge is it's shared, and then as Laura sort of mentioned, that kind of ripple effect and how that can happen. So I think these are all the really positive things that can come from working together. You know, it's coordinating strategies, it's sharing our knowledge, it's sharing our resources, being aware of what's out there. When that opportunity knocks, being ready for that and using that as well. And I think just, you know, across Scotland, all these wonderful things that are happening across film education, you know, it's really robust what is available, and just how we all work together for the greater good. So I think, yeah, that kind of pretty much sums it up for me in terms of everything that is happening. And I guess particularly now, more than ever, how we continue to do this in these trying times, and problem solving, and, you know, coming up with solutions with these challenges that we're faced just now as well. So more important than ever. But yeah, I think that's me. I've said all I need to say on that.
Brilliant, thanks, Kirsty. Yeah, I totally agree. I think, you know, it's at the heart of all of these presentations has been different forms of collaboration, whether that's teacher and pupil, teacher and organisation, between organisations as well. So we've got a couple of questions and a kind of discussion going in the chat at the moment. I'll start with this one from Jennifer, which is addressed to you, Kerry. And she asks, what equipment and software did you use in your film club? Before adding that it sounds fantastic.
Oh, okay. Well, thanks very much. We use free stuff basically when it comes to software, just because we simply don't have the budget. So we use iMovie, we use iMotion or Stop Motion Studio if we want to do stop motion animation. Obviously, when it comes to equipment, we do have to buy, but we were kind of talking about this before we came on the meeting today, actually. We use basic tripods from Amazon with basic sort of iPad tripod grips, and the rest of it really is sort of very make do mend. You know, all of our costumes and props are done or are gathered through sort of drives. Like, we put out things to parents saying, if you've got any random junk, please bring it to us, like we'll find a use for it. And trying to be resourceful in that sort of way. So yeah, just the sort of basics. We only have about, I would say, maybe 6 tripods and mounts, and that does a whole range of sort of classes and film club as well. So you don't actually really need a whole lot to get started.
Great, thanks very much, Kerry. I wondered if you wanted to come in on that, Laura, because you were talking during your presentation as well about Screen Ed very much encouraging teachers to work with, you know, a tablet that might already be at the school or any other equipment at the school. Do you guys both feel that's really important to get kind of buy-in from schools and teachers, that it's not seen as this inaccessible kind of pinnacle to get into filmmaking with really expensive equipment?
Yeah, definitely. I think that's often that, and also just knowledge of the tech seems to be 2 major barriers that, you know, are seen to be for starting film. And actually, you know, I'd said when we were kind of chatting before the panel started that before I started working for Screen Ed, I wasn't really au fait with Apple, for example, for using iPads, and
one of the things that we were keen to do in terms of that sustainability was make sure that, now not all schools have iPads, but it was make sure that if they, many of the schools that we worked with did have them, we provided them, but it was also to make sure that whatever we were using was really simple tech to use. And I think the great thing that we were kind of chatting about beforehand was that it's really kind of user friendly. And so for me, it's that kind of twofold thing, that it's kind of making people I guess comfortable with using the tech, but also making them aware that you don't actually need fancy cameras or even tripods. If you can get hold of one, great. But like Kerry's shown, I mean, I know you've got tripods and the iPad holders, Kerry, but that is a skill in itself. Actually, some of the stuff you were talking about with the lighting boards and actually just getting your kids to think about what they can use that they've got to hand. I mean, I think that's a massively creative skill as well that teachers are really adept at. I would say better than sometimes, quite often better than filmmakers coming in to think, oh, actually, we could maybe use this. And it is just about that creative thinking as well. So, I'm always bowled over by some of the great things that teachers come up with of, just using the resources that they've got. And I think, showing them that that's a transferable skill to film is really key.
I think I completely agree, and particularly coming from a secondary environment and teaching media as a subject, there has always been the debate, and lots of you will start nodding here, I'm sure, about whether we invest money in camera equipment or other things. And, I think given the technology that young people have in their pockets these days, I really don't think that an investment in actual camera equipment is worth the money, in this current day and age, if you work in an environment where bring your own device is acceptable and widely used.
Thanks very much, both. I think that's a really interesting point, especially when high-end camera equipment changes every year or so as well. You can end up spending a lot of money on specialist equipment that 2 or 3 years' time seems outdated. There's been a really good discussion in the chat that I thought I would bring to folks' attention, and maybe Kerry, you can speak to this one as well. First point coming from, the question is, one issue I often run into with teaching film is the lack of specific CFE, that's Curriculum for Excellence for those not based in Scotland, E's and O's, and benchmarks that I can point to when asked how I am assessing this. Analysis and depth seems to be covered with literacy and English and some humanities. I've been challenged about why I am wasting time teaching pupils how to make film when it doesn't fit into the curriculum. And just before I go to you, Kerry, there was a response by Katja as well, and feel free to chip in and speak as well, Katja. You've written that re the lack of specific CFE E's and O's. You'd make reference to expressive arts and benchmarks for filmmaking in particular, but also film education more generally that might be useful, such as confidence in self and others, emotional literacy, creativity, aesthetic and cultural values, cooperation, communication, friendship, which are all kind of part of that. And I guess it kind of goes to what you guys were speaking to there as well, about your young people creatively solving problems with a lack of equipment. Kerry, you had mentioned that they'll just get a bit of tin foil and put it over some cardboard to have the bounce board. So yeah, I don't know if you wanted to come in on that, Kerry, in terms of the question of the CFE E's and O's.
Yeah, I mean, we've done a lot of work in our school, and I really have to give the credit to Martin Naidu, not because his wife is on the call today, but because he actually did the work. Martin Naidu did a lot of work going through the BGE E's and O's and picking out the ones that were appropriate for our benchmarking for our School of Media programme. And Katja has completely hit the nail on the head. A lot of it comes from the expressive arts stuff, and luckily we work in an environment where we've not been challenged on our expertise to assess that, which seems a little bit, I'm not sure about that, because we're meant to all be teachers of young people, so I don't really understand why you wouldn't have an expertise to assess that. But I guess attitudes towards obviously film education are different in different establishments, and that's really unfortunate that seems to be the case there, Wendy. So yeah, I mean, we use the E's and O's from expressive arts. It seems to work really well. We don't use a lot of the dance ones, to be fair, but the drama ones and the art ones and some of the music ones as well.
Great, thanks, Kerry. I don't know if Wendy or Katja wanted to come in on that point. Wendy's just told us in the chat that she will, so if you give us a second.
Hello, is that working?
Yeah, we can hear you, Wendy.
Hello, everybody. Kerry's absolutely bang on, and
The sound has gone a wee bit now. I don't know if you're far from the mic or
come a bit closer.
That's it.
Trying to really promote and support film education is something we're so passionate about, and it's wonderful to have this conference. Can I just say how inspired I've been today by everybody's contributions? I'm really challenged, and I'm really excited to go back to school and go back to blended learning and really bring a lot of what I've learned today to it. With the E's and O's, I think my fundamental issue is because film isn't specifically named other than as a potential text within English and literacy, it seems to give some of the more feared among our senior leaders cover to say, no, you can't do that, whereas we're always looking for ways to do that and to go out there and to encourage our young people to use their phones, to use their devices, to use whatever equipment we can scrounge up that's, you know, available to us, and really build a competency in film across Scotland. And I think that basically what I'd really love is, Kerry, can you share what you've done? Could you give us it? Because I think that would really give a lot of people a little bit more cover and a little bit more support. It's very much a secondary issue, I would argue, over a primary issue as well, because secondary schools are so compartmentalised between subjects. So that's just where I'm very much coming from. But I'm going to, I've gone through all these laws myself, and I've tried to draw out, you know, most relevant ones and show my senior management and actually HMIE, who really questioned media at first to third year, to show them, no, look, this is how we're progressing, this is how we're challenging our young people, supporting our young people, encouraging all their skills and their own interests. And this huge literacy attainment improvement that comes through the use of film is just amazing to see, and also great to have some research for as well. So thank you very much, and I hope I didn't confuse anyone.
No, not at all, Wendy. I just wondered if you or Kerry wanted to explain a wee bit more about what the E's and O's are. I realise we've got quite an international audience here. It might be a bit specific to Scotland.
Okay, so our curriculum for excellence is split into different curricular areas, and under each of those curriculum areas is a group of what we call experiences and outcomes that describe how young people move through our curriculum. These are assessed using benchmarks, which are very different. The E's and O's are divided into 4 levels, first to 4th level and early level as well. And the idea would be that majority of pupils are achieving level 4 by the end of 3rd year, before they move on to their senior phase and their exam qualifications. Does that sound right?
Perfect, yep, thank you very much. Yeah, it's a really good discussion. I think that is a challenge that many of us have faced in different settings in terms of trying to kind of make the case repeatedly for film as a worthy topic for investigation and education, no matter what level we're at. Both Laura and Kerry, I thought what was really good about your projects that you guys are talking about is how led they are by the young people. Kerry, you mentioned that there was only one time where you chose a film, and otherwise it's always the students choosing the film. Do you think that autonomy and that sense of ownership has really kind of been central to the success of the film club? And again, Laura, with you in our Edinburgh, I wondered how kind of important it was that it was driven by the students' own experiences.
I would say for us it definitely is central to the success. I think the fact that they even have discussion around choosing what the film is also part of what kind of builds that critical voice, and those sort of, I'm going to say arguments because it is arguments at that stage over what they're going to choose and why we should be watching X, Y, and Z. You know, Scott and I have considered in the past sort of curating stuff or choosing certain films for them. But I think I have had, as a film student, quite a negative experience of people telling me what I should be valuing and telling me what does have or doesn't have, clout. And that's something that I was really keen, probably from a personal standpoint, to kind of avoid kind of putting on to the young people. So that's kind of got a little bit to do with it as well.
Absolutely. What about you, Laura? Is there anything you would comment on with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's quite a few ways that we do it. So even the involvement of people that have been on other programmes with us at Screen Ed, some of the films that for our Edinburgh, for example, we encouraged were part of the course for the young people and their teachers to watch were ones that had been made by young people on other programmes like the Cashback for Creativity or other schools that we'd worked with, for example, using those to kind of inspire young people and show them that actually it's not this big complex thing, that it really is driven by young people. We're really keen as well at Screen Ed and also working with in partnership with Interfilm and CMI and the council, that it is very kind of youth driven. Because young people have to feel that they have ownership and agency of something. It can't simply be tokenistic, or otherwise, and Kerry, I'm sure you know this, you've experienced this yourself, that if it does feel that way, then you disengage. And I very much kind of nodded along when Kerry was saying that the experience of being taught film, for example, as a student. I taught for many years at Dundee University in film, and I was very, there is a real, you can get caught up in a culture of putting certain things on a pedestal and seeing the value in certain things, and then kind of, without ever maybe realising that you're doing it, you might be negating other things that young people actually value in their culture. So I think it's something really to be mindful of as well. I also wanted to mention to sorry, who was it? Was it Katja and who else? Wendy, sorry.
Sorry.
That just on the curriculum for excellence, we were really and again it was through partnership working, and this was before I came into the programme at Screen Ed, but with Interfilm and CMI and the council and ourselves at C, that we were really mindful of obviously that coming up quite a lot, that certain schools, and particularly if you had a teacher that was really engaged and saw the value in film, that maybe there was barriers to it higher up, heads or deputy heads saying no, we're not doing that, I don't see the value in it. So a lot of we curriculum link all the resources that we use on our programmes that have been used in our Edinburgh and Your Take. And obviously I didn't actually speak much to this in my presentation, but using, Robert, in your presentation, the 3 C's and the 3 S's, the great resource among many, many great resources from Interfilm that we kind of pointed and our teachers to on the Our Ed programme and used. So I think those really help too, because teachers can actually take things like that back as evidence and say, look, this is linked to the curriculum. This is the things that I can kind of point to actually that are of value. But I do think that is an issue that film needs to be written about a bit more in the Bible, that is the curriculum for excellence. It's absolutely gigantic, and I think it only maybe mentions film once or twice.
Thanks a lot, Laura. I think that's some really good points. I should have explained, for those not familiar with the resource, the 3 C's and the 3 S's. It's this resource that focuses on the 3 C's of colour, character and camera, and the 3 S's, settings, sound and story. We used Interfilm's resources in our project with the 5 probationary teachers as well, and it's really question prompts about the sound or the setting or the character or the colour to encourage the young people to start to break down film in that way. And again, our teachers were hugely positive about that. You heard Kirsty talk at the end to say that she could kind of just run with them once she'd used the resource for a few weeks. And as you were saying there, Laura, in terms of evidence in it, the teachers that we had the end of their practitioner inquiry produced a PowerPoint presentation, and they linked these things to their own practice in the classroom superbly well, and how they felt their young people had developed more kind of sophisticated questions throughout the project. So I think, yeah, it's absolutely trying to connect all those things together to, again, you know, show the powers that be, the importance or how useful film can be in those classroom settings. We don't have any other questions at the moment. Tony has written in the chat that he would echo that the learner autonomy in choosing the films for the club, sourcing the films, etc., and agreeing on the views and genres has visibly grown learners' self-confidence and participation in the classroom, both peer and students to the teacher, much increased interaction, which kind of speaks to what you were both saying, Kerry and Laura. Even at Queen Margaret University, again, we've started to do that as well. I have a certain module about a certain genre of film or a period of film history, and again, we've encouraged students to choose the screenings rather than us imposing our screenings on them. I'll be interested in the keynote tomorrow, which is about decolonising film education, but when you were speaking there, Laura, I thought a lot about dismantling canons, and you know, there are certain canons in film history that have been built up for many decades, which perhaps reflect the privileged position of the people who kind of canonize these types of films. And so again, I think part of what we do is that kind of social justice approach to try and you know, take down some of those hierarchies, or at least question them and question these canonical texts. We also had Mary Johnston, who is a PhD student at Queen Margaret University, and she said that she thinks some management teams, particularly in secondary schools, struggle to see the value in investing time and resources into film and media, and are only really happy to acknowledge it if you can explicitly link it to literacy, which can be very limiting. And she says very inspirational presentations, by the way. I don't think we have any more questions in the chat. I'm aware we're about 10 minutes over our supposed 4 o'clock finish time. So I'd just like to round up by again, giving thanks to our presenters, Kerry, Laura and Kirsty as well, for chipping in. Kerry has offered to share resources with her, so please bombard her with requests on behalf of the rest of us. Thanks very much for tuning in, and hopefully we'll see many of you tomorrow when we have our keynote and a second panel again in the afternoon. Thanks for your time, and speak to you soon.